Chapter 1. The Infiltration. The vast hall of the Terran Military Command shimmered with holographic displays, each one detailing Earth's military readiness across its colonies. Kaelara of the Zarynth Empire adjusted her diplomatic robes, a perfect blend of elegance and functional armor, her violet-hued skin a stark contrast to the humans bustling around her. She was here under the guise of an envoy, but her true purpose was far more sinister. Ambassador Kaelara, a young lieutenant, greeted her stiffly. General Marcus Kane will see you now. Her pulse quickened. Marcus Kane, the savage general, as her father had called him. The man who had single-handedly thwarted an earlier Zarynth incursion using brutal and unconventional tactics. The human warlord who had turned the tide of battle with cunning and ruthlessness. Kaelara's mission was clear: gain his trust, learn his secrets, and ensure her father's victory in the inevitable war to come. She stepped into the room, her confidence a carefully constructed mask. Kane stood at the center, his back to her, studying a massive holographic map of Earth's territories. His broad shoulders, clad in the dark green of Earth's military uniform, radiated authority. Ambassador Kaelara, he said without turning around, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble. You're late. My apologies, General Kane, she replied, her voice smooth and measured. I was admiring the efficiency of your command center. He turned to face her, and for a moment, Kaelara was caught off guard. Marcus Kane was not the barbaric figure her father had described. His features were sharp, his steel-gray eyes piercing and calculating, but there was a calm intensity about him, a sense of control that belied the ruthless, savage reputation. Flattery won't get you far here, Kane said, motioning for her to sit. Let's skip the pleasantries. What does the Zarynth Empire want from Earth? Kaelara smiled faintly as she took her seat. We seek collaboration. The galaxy grows more dangerous by the day, and our two civilizations could benefit greatly from an alliance. An alliance, Kane repeated, leaning forward, his gaze unyielding. Interesting choice of words for a species that's tried to conquer us twice. Unfortunate misunderstandings of the past, she countered smoothly. My father's policies were short-sighted. I am here to correct that. Kane's eyes narrowed, studying her as if dissecting her every word. Kaelara's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. She had prepared for this. She had spent years mastering the art of diplomacy and deception. We'll see, Kane said finally. For now, you'll observe our operations and report back to me, but understand this, Ambassador. One misstep and you'll find humans far less forgiving than your father might think. The tension in the room was palpable as Kaelara inclined her head. Understood, General. I look forward to proving the sincerity of my intentions. As Kaelara left the meeting, her mind churned with conflicting emotions. Kane was not what she expected. He was sharp, suspicious, and utterly uncompromising. But there was something else, a flicker of humanity she had not anticipated. At the end of the hall, she paused, her communicator buzzing. A message from her father appeared on the screen. Progress report. Do not fail me. Kaelara clenched her jaw. Failure was not an option, but for the first time she felt the weight of doubt creeping into her mind. Chapter 2. Beneath the Armor. Kaelara adjusted to her new role as a liaison within Earth's military, joining strategy meetings and field simulations. The humans worked differently than her people, relying heavily on improvisation and collaboration rather than rigid hierarchies. It was both chaotic and surprisingly effective. During a simulated mission, Kaelara found herself paired with Kane. The exercise involved securing a heavily fortified position, and Kane's approach was nothing short of audacious. We're split into 3 teams, Kane explained, pointing to the holographic map. Team Alpha creates a diversion here, drawing their fire. Team Bravo secures the perimeter. Team Charlie, led by me, punches straight through the center. A direct assault? Kaelara asked, raising an eyebrow. That's reckless. Kane smirked. It's unexpected, and that's why it'll work. The simulation began, and Kaelara watched in amazement as Kane's strategy unfolded. The diversion teams executed perfectly, sowing chaos among the enemy. Kane led his team with precision, adapting to every obstacle with a mix of calculated risks and sheer audacity. By the end of the exercise, they had achieved total victory. You doubted me, Kane said afterward, his tone teasing. I doubted the strategy, Kaelara corrected. But, I admit, Your methods are effective." Kane's expression softened, and for a moment Kaelara saw a hint of warmth beneath his steely exterior. "War isn't just about strategy," he said. "It's about reading people, knowing when to push, when to pull back. You learn to adapt, or you lose." Kaelara nodded, his words resonating with her more than she expected. For the first time, she began to see why humanity had survived so many galactic threats. Later that evening, Kaelara stood on the observation deck, staring out at the Earth below. The planet was beautiful, vibrant in ways her homeworld was not. She thought of Kane, his words, his unwavering dedication to his people. He was nothing like the savage her father had described. Her communicator buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. Another message from her father. "Trust no one. Extract the information and return home. The invasion is imminent." Kaelara's chest tightened. Could she truly betray these people? Could she betray Kane? Chapter 3. The Discovery. Kaelara's days were filled with observing Earth's military operations, but her nights were restless. The longer she spent among the humans, the harder it became to reconcile the image her father had painted of them with the reality she witnessed. They were not weak or primitive. Instead, they displayed a remarkable resilience, their ingenuity pushing the boundaries of what Kaelara thought possible. Their camaraderie and loyalty to one another were traits she found both admirable and perplexing. As the days passed, she became a familiar figure among the humans, even earning cautious respect from some of the officers. Kane, however, remained an enigma. His sharp wit and strategic brilliance were matched by an unwavering focus that made him both a formidable leader and an impossible man to read. He seemed to watch her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, as if trying to unravel her true purpose. One evening, Kaelara found herself alone in the command center. The usual hum of activity was absent, leaving the room bathed in the soft glow of holographic displays. Her gaze lingered on the central console, where Earth's defensive schematics were stored. She had spent weeks working her way into the humans' trust, and now the culmination of her mission was within reach. Her fingers danced across the controls, bypassing layers of encryption with practiced ease. The schematics unfolded before her, a detailed web of Earth's defenses. Every vulnerability, every weak point was laid bare. She should have felt triumph, but instead, a cold unease settled over her. Kaelara's thoughts were a whirlwind. She pictured the faces of the soldiers she had come to know, the young lieutenant who always greeted her with a shy smile, the grizzled veteran who had shared stories of battles fought to protect his family. She thought of Kane, whose relentless determination was driven not by conquest, but by a fierce desire to safeguard his people. Her hand hovered over the controls, the data ready to be transmitted to her father. Images of destruction flashed in her mind, Earth's cities reduced to rubble, its people annihilated. She clenched her jaw, her resolve wavering. Could she truly condemn these people to such a fate? "Ambassador!" a voice interrupted her thoughts. Kaelara spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Marcus Kane stood in the doorway, his figure silhouetted against the corridor's light. His steel-gray eyes narrowed as they flicked to the terminal. "What are you doing?" Kaelara's mind raced, but her expression remained calm. "Research," she said smoothly, gesturing to the holographic display. "I was trying to understand your tactical philosophies." Kane stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "Research," he repeated, his voice low and measured. "In the middle of the night? On our most secure systems?" Kaelara forced a faint smile. "Your strategies are unconventional. I wanted to study them further to better understand your people." He studied her in silence, the weight of his scrutiny pressing down on her. "You're full of surprises, Ambassador," he said finally. "But surprises can be dangerous." Kaelara's heart pounded as he moved to the console, his fingers brushing over the controls. The screen flickered, returning to the previous display. He glanced at her, his expression inscrutable. "Get some rest," he said, his tone neutral. "Tomorrow we have a lot of work to do." As he turned and left the room, Kaelara exhaled shakily, her composure crumbling. She had narrowly avoided suspicion, but the encounter left her shaken. The data she had uncovered remained untouched, the decisions she had avoided weighing heavily on her. Kaelara retreated to her quarters, but sleep eluded her. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Trust no one. Extract the information and return home. The invasion is imminent. She stared at the communicator on her desk, her hands trembling. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and for the first time, Kaelara was no longer certain where her loyalty lay. She thought of Kane's parting words, his warning about the danger of surprises. Perhaps he had seen through her more than she realized. Perhaps he already suspected her true purpose. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Kaelara buried her face in her hands, the weight of her mission suffocating. She had been raised to see humanity as an enemy, a threat to be neutralized. But now, she was no longer sure who the true enemy was. The lines between duty and conscience blurred, leaving her adrift in a sea of doubt. The hours dragged on, and when dawn finally broke, Kaelara rose with a heavy heart. She had a choice to make, one that would shape the future of both her people and the humans she had come to understand. But with every passing moment, the decision grew more complex, the consequences more dire, and deep down, she knew that whatever path she chose, there would be no turning back. Chapter 4: A Fractured Allegiance. Kaelara's hands trembled as she entered her quarters that night. The encrypted files she had accessed were burned into her memory. Earth's defenses, its weaknesses, and its most vulnerable points. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. The Zarynth Empire does not tolerate failure. But the weight of the past weeks was suffocating. She had seen humanity's resilience, their innovation, and above all, their heart. Could she truly pave the way for their annihilation? The following morning, Kaelara accompanied Kane to a military outpost on the outskirts of Earth's central colony. A skirmish had broken out with a rogue faction, and Kane was overseeing the response. The journey was tense, the silence in the shuttle heavy with unspoken words. "Are you always this quiet?" Kane asked, breaking the silence. Kaelara glanced at him, her mask of calm slipping for a moment. "Sometimes silence is necessary, it allows for observation." Kane smirked. "Fair enough. But sometimes words are necessary too, like when you're trying to figure out what someone's really after." Kaelara stiffened, her pulse quickening. Was that a subtle accusation, or simply his usual sharp wit? The rogue faction's forces were better armed than expected, and the outpost was under heavy fire by the time they arrived. Kane took charge immediately, barking orders to his troops. "Kaelara," he said, turning to her. "You've seen battles before. I need someone who can think on their feet." Her heart skipped. "You trust me to lead?" "I trust you to survive," he said bluntly. "We don't have the luxury of doubt right now." Kaelara nodded, swallowing her fear. Together they coordinated a counterattack. She used her knowledge of Zarynth's strategies to outmaneuver the rogue faction, earning the respect of Kane's soldiers. But as the battle raged, a moment of hesitation nearly cost her. A soldier cried out, pinned down by enemy fire. Kaelara froze, memories of Zarynth warriors drilling into her mind. Sacrifice is acceptable, weakness is not. Before she could act, Kane dove into the line of fire, pulling the soldier to safety. "What the hell were you waiting for?" Kane snapped, his voice a mix of anger and concern. Kaelara faltered, the weight of her conflict surfacing. Kane stared at her, his expression softening just slightly. "Get your head in the game, Ambassador. Out here, hesitation kills." The battle was won, but the victory felt hollow to Kaelara. That night, as the soldiers celebrated, Kane found her alone, staring at the stars. "You did well today," he said, sitting beside her. "I hesitated," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "That could have cost lives." Kane nodded. "It could have, but it didn't. And you learned something, didn't you?" Kaelara turned to him, her violet eyes searching his face. "Why do you care so much? About your soldiers, about everything?" Kane's gaze hardened, but his voice was soft. "Because every life matters. Every decision we make ripples out. You've seen the damage war can do, haven't you?" Kaelara hesitated, her mind flashing to the destruction her father's campaigns had wrought. "Yes," she admitted, "I've seen it." "Then you know why we fight so hard to prevent it," Kane said. Kaelara's chest tightened. How could she betray someone who believed so deeply in protecting his people? Back in her quarters, Kaelara accessed her communicator. Her father's image appeared, his stern expression as unyielding as ever. Ever. "You've had enough time," he said. "Do you have what we need?" Kaelara hesitated, her throat dry. I need more time. Their systems are complex." Her father's eyes narrowed. "Time is a luxury we do not have, Kaelara. The fleet is mobilizing. If you cannot complete your mission, you will be left behind." The line went dead, leaving Kaelara staring at the screen. Her allegiance to her father and her growing respect for Kane were tearing her apart. Kaelara stood at a crossroads, the weight of her decisions threatening to crush her. The invasion was imminent, and she was running out of time to choose a side. Her communicator buzzed again, this time a message from Kane. "Meet me in the command room. We need to talk." As she made her way to the command room, her mind raced. Was her secret about to be exposed? Or was this something else entirely? Kaelara stepped inside, her heart pounding as she faced Kane's piercing gaze. "Kaelara," he said, his tone unreadable, "there's something I need to ask you." And in that moment, Kaelara knew her choices would determine the fate of two civilizations. Chapter 5, The Breaking Point. Kaelara stepped into the command room, the echo of her boots swallowed by the hume of holographic projectors. Marcus Kane stood at the central display, his broad back to her as he examined Earth's defensive schematics. The room's ambient glow cast sharp shadows, accentuating his commanding presence. "You wanted to see me?" Kaelara asked, her voice calm but wary. Kane turned, his piercing gray eyes meeting hers. For a moment, the weight of his gaze silenced her thoughts. "I need the truth," he said bluntly. "What are you doing here?" Kaelara's breath caught. Her mind raced, crafting a response, but the weight of the past weeks pressed down on her. "I've told you, diplomatic relations. My people—" "Don't," Kane interrupted, his voice firm. "I've read the reports. Every move you've made since you arrived. You've spent more time near restricted systems than any diplomat should." Kaelara's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. "Are you accusing me of something, General?" "I'm asking you to stop lying to me," Kane said, his tone sharp but not unkind. The room was thick with tension, the silence between them stretching thin. Finally, Kaelara exhaled, her shoulders sinking slightly. "And if I am lying?" Kane stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Then I want to know why, and I want to know what happens next." Kaelara hesitated. She had always been trained to see humans as a threat, pragmatic but brutish, a species driven by short-sighted instincts. Yet Marcus Kane was nothing like her father's descriptions. He was sharp, disciplined, and deeply loyal to his people. Her violet eyes softened as she finally spoke. "I came here under false pretenses. My mission was to assess your defenses and report back to the Zarynth Empire," Kane finished for her, his tone neutral. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Kane's expression didn't change, but the flicker of disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. "Why tell me now?" Kaelara's jaw tightened. "Because I've seen things I didn't expect to see. Your people—" She paused, searching for the right words. "You aren't the monsters we were taught to believe you are. You fight for something more than survival. You fight for each other. And that surprised you?" "Yes." Kaelara's voice cracked slightly, the weight of her conflicting loyalties threatening to spill over. "It changed everything." Before Kane could respond, the room's comm system activated. "General Kane, priority transmission incoming," the voice crackled. Kane nodded to the technician monitoring the feed. "Patch it through." The holographic display shifted, revealing the stern visage of Kaelara's father, High Lord Vyran of the Zarynth Empire. His eyes, a mirror of Kaelara's, burned with cold intensity. "General Kane," Vyran began, his voice sharp and commanding. "I am High Lord Vyran, ruler of the Zarynth Empire. I believe you have something of mine." Kane's gaze flicked to Kaelara, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't aware we were holding anything of yours." "Do not play coy, General," Vyran snapped. "My daughter has been embedded in your ranks long enough. I trust she has fulfilled her purpose." Kaelara's breath caught. "Father, Silence, Kaelara, Vyran barked. Your mission is complete. You will return to the fleet immediately. The human's time is over. Kane's jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. Is that a declaration of war, High Lord? It is an inevitability, Vyran said coldly. Your species has meddled in galactic affairs for too long. Kaelara's reports confirm your vulnerabilities. This is your only warning. Surrender or face annihilation. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Kane turned to Kaelara, his expression now a mask of controlled fury. So that's what this was. You've been feeding him our weaknesses? Kaelara stepped forward, her voice trembling with urgency. No, I haven't sent him anything, Marcus. I couldn't. Why not? He demanded. Because you suddenly grew a conscience? Or because you know he's using you as a pawn? Kaelara flinched but held his gaze. Because I've seen what you fight for. And I couldn't be the one to take that away. Kane stared at her for a long moment, the storm of emotions in his eyes slowly settling. Then you need to prove it, he said finally. Help us stop him, Kane said, his tone firm. You know his strategies, his fleet, his weaknesses. If you're serious about switching sides, now's the time. Kaelara hesitated. Betraying her father meant severing all ties to her people, but standing by and letting the Zarynth Empire destroy Earth was something she could no longer justify. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. I'll help you. Before Kaelara could elaborate, an alarm blared through the base. The holographic map lit up with dozens of red markers, Zarynth warships, emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. They're here, a technician called out, panic lacing his voice. Kane's expression hardened, his commanding presence taking over. This is it, he said, turning to Kaelara. We're out of time. Are you ready to prove where you stand? Kaelara nodded, though her heart pounded with fear and uncertainty. I am. As the base erupted into controlled chaos, Kaelara felt the weight of her choice. Her next actions would define not only her future, but the fate of two civilizations. Chapter 6, The Final Stand. The command center of Earth's primary military base was a hive of activity. Red lights strobed as alarms blared, marking the arrival of the Zarynth invasion fleet. Marcus Kane stood at the center of the chaos, calm and composed, barking orders to officers and analysts. Kaelara stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the massive holographic display of Earth's orbital defenses. The Zarynth fleet was vast, their sleek black ships forming a menacing wave. At the center of the formation was the flagship, Zarynth's Wrath, a vessel that dwarfed any ship in Earth's fleet. Kaelara's heart sank. She knew her father was aboard, commanding the invasion personally. Status report, Kane demanded. Enemy fleet holding position just outside Mars's orbit, a lieutenant replied. They're scanning our defenses, likely preparing for a coordinated strike. Kane's jaw tightened. We need to disrupt their formation before they close the distance. Suggestions? Kaelara stepped forward, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. I can help, she said. The officers exchanged wary glances, but Kane didn't hesitate. What do you have in mind? Kaelara activated a console, pulling up the schematics of her father's flagship. The Zarynth's Wrath is the key. If you can disable its central command systems, the rest of the fleet will falter. They rely heavily on centralized coordination. And how do we get close enough to disable it? Kane asked. Kaelara hesitated, the enormity of her proposal sinking in. You don't. I do. I know the ship's layout, its vulnerabilities. If you can get me aboard, I can take out the command systems from within. It's a suicide mission, one of the officers said. Not if I have backup, Kaelara replied, her gaze locking with Kane's. Kane leaned over the console, studying the schematics. If we send a strike team, it has to be small. Anything larger than a stealth shuttle will be detected and destroyed. Kaelara nodded. A team of 5, maximum. The critical systems are here, she said, pointing to a section near the ship's core. If we overload the power conduits, it will force a chain reaction, disabling the ship's main systems. Overloading those conduits will destroy the entire section, Kane noted. You won't have much time to get out. I know the risks, Kaelara said firmly. Kane studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable, then he nodded. All right, Let's make it happen. The stealth shuttle streaked through the blackness of space, its cloaking technology barely enough to evade the Zarynth fleet's advanced scanners. Kaelara, Kane, and 3 elite soldiers sat in tense silence, the hum of the shuttle's engines the only sound. "You don't have to do this," Kane said quietly, leaning toward Kaelara. "Yes, I do," she replied. "This is my mess to fix." Kane nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "Just make sure you make it back." The shuttle docked in a hidden maintenance bay of the Varth's Wrath. As the hatch opened, Kaelara led the team through the ship's labyrinthine corridors. The air was thick with tension, every step a calculated risk. Suddenly, a squad of Zarynth soldiers appeared, their weapons raised. "Contact!" one of Kane's soldiers shouted. The narrow corridor erupted into chaos, laser fire streaking in every direction. Kaelara ducked behind a bulkhead, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected resistance this early. "Kane, we need to move," she called out. "We're pinned down," Kane replied, firing off a volley of shots. Kaelara's mind raced. "Cover me!" she shouted, darting out of cover and using her intimate knowledge of Zarynth tactics to flank the soldiers. With precision and speed, she disabled their shields, allowing Kane's team to finish them off. "Impressive," Kane said as they regrouped. "Don't get used to it," Kaelara quipped, though a faint smile crossed her lips. The team reached the core systems, a sprawling chamber filled with glowing conduits and massive energy reactors. Kaelara moved quickly, inputting override codes into the control panels. "We've got incoming," one of the soldiers shouted. A new squad of Zarynth soldiers stormed in, led by a towering figure clad in ornate armor, High Lord Vyran himself. "Kaelara," Vyran said, his voice cold and commanding. "Step away from that console." Kaelara froze, her father's presence immobilizing her for a moment. "Father," she said, her voice trembling, "you don't have to do this." "It is already done," Vyran replied. "Step aside and I will spare your life. These humans are beneath you." "No," Kaelara said, her voice gaining strength. "They're not, and neither am I." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "So, you've chosen them over your own blood. Very well." He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Kane stepped forward, his rifle aimed at Vyran. "You'll have to go through me first," Kane said. "Gladly," Vyran sneered. The room erupted into battle. Kane engaged Vyran directly, their clash of wills as much mental as physical. Kaelara focused on completing the override sequence, her fingers flying across the controls. "Kane, I need 2 more minutes," she shouted. "You'll get them," he growled, blocking a strike from Vyran's energy blade. Finally, the system began to overload. The conduits glowed dangerously, warning sirens blaring throughout the chamber. "It's done," Kaelara yelled. Kane shoved Vyran back with all his strength. "Then let's move." But Vyran wasn't finished. As the team began their retreat, he raised a detonator. "If I cannot have victory, then neither will you." Without hesitation, Kaelara lunged toward her father, knocking the detonator from his hand. The resulting struggle was brief but brutal, ending with Vyran pinned beneath a collapsed conduit. "Go!" Kaelara shouted to Kane and the others. "Out without you!" Kane yelled back. "There's no time," Kaelara insisted. "I'll hold him here. Go!" Kane's eyes met hers, a storm of emotions in his gaze. Finally, he nodded. "We'll come back for you." As the team escaped, Kaelara stood over her father, her heart heavy. "You would betray your own people for them?" Vyran rasped. "I would save us all from you," Kaelara said quietly. The ship shuddered violently as the core systems overloaded. Kaelara closed her eyes, a sense of peace washing over her. Epilogue. The Zarynth fleet retreated, their coordination shattered with the destruction of the Varth's Wrath. On Earth, Marcus Kane stood on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "He didn't have to do it," he said quietly. "He made her choice," a soldier replied. Kane nodded, a faint smile breaking through his grief. "And she saved us all." Kaelara's sacrifice was etched into history, a symbol of redemption and unity. In the years to come, humanity and the Zarynth Empire would forge an uneasy peace, bound by the memory of the woman who bridged 2 worlds.